Welcome to Zero Shot Espresso, the show for AI engineers who are tired of building data pipelines. In this podcast, we talk to engineers and founders about deep systems engineering and the messy reality of data in the age of AI. My name is Jay, your host for the show. I'm co-founder of Daft, and we are building data systems to power AI products. Today, I'm super excited to have Denny with me. Denny is a longtime Spark and MLflow contributor, one of the OGs on Spark, really. Unity Catalog and Delta Lake now is one of the main things, right, Denny, that you work on. And you're a principal developer advocate at Databricks. I like to call you kind of like the face of Databricks because you're everywhere, kind of running around and, hosting all the events. And then, so Denny's not just a dev advocate, he's a hands-on distributed systems and a database person, right? Previously worked on SQL Server, building out, actual enterprise data warehouses and BI tools. Welcome to the podcast, Denny.
Jay, thank you very much for inviting me. It's always great hanging out with you. One thing we need to start doing, which we haven't done yet, is next time I'm down there, we got to start bouldering because you're usually at the dog patch, right?
I'm always at dog patch. I started hanging out more in Redwood City now. But yeah, bouldering,
okay.
Let's do it.
Good to know. Yeah, because I definitely go to dog patch every so often, but I haven't been Redwood City in a while. So yeah, we'll definitely figure that out. But thanks very much for the introduction. Yeah, the only thing I would just simply say add is I am a geek by the very definition, as you can probably tell from all this stuff back here. This is real, by the way. So yes, if I can squeeze in some more call outs to the expanse, I will, but I also did not want to completely derail this podcast. So yes. So yeah, let's have at it. Let's talk about data. Let's talk about AI. I'm sure that's the main reason why people are listening to this thing.
Yeah, let's do it. Also, the podcast is called Zero Shot Espresso. So we like to ask, how do you feel about espresso? I saw you raise a cup just now. What are you drinking right now? And what is your daily espresso habit?
No problem. Well, in that case, let me sound like a sales guy. I drink Espresso Vivace's coffee out of Seattle, okay? Arguably the main reason we actually have the third culture coffee, because if you go to Espresso Vivace, they explain on each year and each concept of what do they do. Like, in other words, the temperature of your water is supposed to be 203 degrees Fahrenheit. You're supposed to use a conical burr grinder. So I'm drinking Vita espresso, which I make at home with hemp milk that I do every morning because I'm a bit of a coffee snob. In fact,
you're
there's
a
nothing.
connoisseur, yeah.
Yeah. So in fact, I own the URL. I haven't built the website yet, but I own the URL kirklandcoffeesnob.com. So just as a quick all out.
All right, next big startup domain name. You got to buy it from Denny. I'm so sorry.
Exactly. Sorry. Too bad.
All right, cool. Let's dive right in. I'm really, really curious to dive in because, I think maybe 2-3 years ago now, Databricks really went, okay, we are the data and AI company, right?
Yeah.
Data and AI.
Okay.
And I feel like somehow almost it's been willed into existence. It is the data and AI company now. And I'd love to really understand, what does that mean? How much of it is hype? What is actually real today? What has changed? Maybe walk us back 3 years ago. We know Databricks and Snowflake as the BI kind of fighting over analytics and the world of data warehouses. What does that look like today? And how much of this AI stuff is actually just hype versus real?
Okay, so let me give you some backstory just personally, okay, by the way, okay? I'm a guy who joined Databricks back in 2015. I was employee 58 or something like that. I ended up leaving at 2016 purely for personal reasons, and I came back in 2018. Running joke I have is basically the founders, I tell the founders, this is your fault now. You knew what you were getting, so this is your fault that you let me back in. But before I returned, or shortly after I returned, I bought the URL Data AI OS.
Wow.
Okay? Because that's how I looked at Databricks, that we are the data and AI operating system. Okay.
Right.
So yes, we actually had been planning this approach long before the ChatGPT craze. In fact, when we first started the company, when I first joined the company, because I didn't start it, and that's the founders, right? When I first joined the company early on, we were a data science company. We had these wonderful notebooks. We were always focusing on the data science stuff. We were actually forced to do data engineering. In fact, there was this concept called just-in-time data warehousing. It's somewhere in the web archive. It's a horrible name. So the whole premise is we can bring you data warehousing, but we can just in time do it faster.
Right.
This was a marketing campaign that failed miserably. I'm to blame too. I will own this. Okay, so this is on me. But the reason I bring that up is because in a weird way, we accidentally got into this because basically people were saying I need you to process our data first though. I need you to do the ETL processing. Okay, well, fine. Like, because people forget, like Spark, yes, it was known for ETL processing, but what was it for? Matei did it because he was saying, I wanted to run machine learning, right? That was the whole premise of doing this in the first place. And so like, we're going like, okay, fine, we'll do the ETL. And they're like, okay, but we now need to hold this stuff. It's like, okay, fine, now we'll build a data warehouse, right? And then, okay, well, now I now need to do analytics on that stuff. Okay, fine, we'll do some BI stuff, right? And so that's actually how we got into this, because basically our customers kept on asking us to do all this stuff for them, right? And so to your point of exactly like 3 years ago when all the craze about AI finally started kicking in, we're like, oh, thank God, we can start doing the very thing that we were
Back to
trying
the
to do
roots.
back in 2015. Now, is it all hype? Yes. Point blank answer, yes. Okay. But gigantic but. Okay. There's a lot of things you can absolutely 100% do using AI. 100% do. The problem is that everybody keeps going off saying like you can solve all your problems. Okay, like let's just talk about vibe coding because just it's right now current. Okay, let's start off. Vibe coding, love it, excellent. Play with it. Oh dear God, yes, my God, have a blast. Okay, you should have fun. Like I even tell people like, for the love of dear God, that's the reason I vibe code, because it's fun. Like oh my God, I can just do all sorts of cool shit. Right? Can you take that stuff and put it in production? No. Not, right? Like, are you forgetting things like AI observability? Are you thinking things about A/B testing? Are you forgetting things about like putting the code in GitHub so you can track and do diffs? Like, come on! Like, don't pretend that you can just like vibe code and then magically have everything done. It, even if you're an SMB, forget about enterprise, right? Do you're supposed to care about privacy at least a little bit, right? You're supposed to at least care about authentication a little bit, right? I'm not trying to make you an Uber expert, but you're supposed to care about this stuff a little bit. So, yeah, use vibe coding as a great tool to, for example, PM your stuff. Use vibe coding even as a starting point for what you're building. I still remember when I was creating these slides, I was trying to explain, I forgot what even the concept was, but I was just trying to explain a particular concept. Like the prompt to Gemini was like not even half a page long. It was wonderful. But then I spent 4 hours, not the entire time, but I spent 4 hours because they got the fucking, excuse me, the bullet, the color of the bullet points wrong. And
Yeah,
I'm like telling it which color to put in. And I
yeah.
was spent 4 hours trying to
And
get,
the
and
only way
all,
to do it is a prompt, right? You can't really
no,
like affect it.
no. The only way I did is I went ahead and went to Canva, recreated
Oh,
the bullet point, and then copy pasted over the slides to
yeah.
get the color right.
Oh my
Okay.
goodness.
Right. And so the context I'm saying is like, there's a lot of hype because it does in fact help with the creativity. And in fact, it's just like when people say, oh, we don't want hallucinations. No, yes, you do. You want hallucinations up to a point because that's the whole point of the creativity, or to go crazy, to go sometimes a little bit outside the box. But it needs to be reproducible. It needs to be governed. It
Yeah,
needs to be managed.
yeah.
So, in order to do these things right, you actually have to go ahead and actually build all the infrastructure around it.
Gotcha.
So that's why it's actually pretty handy, like the way we think about things within Databricks is like that's why we created Uni Catalog in the first place, right? I'm a maintainer of the project, so yes, it's a little self-serving, but the point is irrelevant of which one you use. Why do you have something like this? Is because you actually want to be able to govern and understand what the lineage is. You want to understand where the data flow is, right? And then the way, at least from my perspective, obviously it's a very Brickster like perspective, was like we recently published the report State of AI Agents. It came out late January, and we basically interviewed like all of our customers, surveyed them, and got some really good, interesting information about what was useful, what was not useful in terms of building these agents. Like, for example, that multi-agent actually is an important concept for everybody now, right? The fact that, I'm actually going to go read this little note just to remind me some of the numbers because there's too many numbers, right? Oh, yeah. Not for market intelligence for the areas of like financial services, retail, and tech, it's like 19%, 14%, and 16% of is all just for AI is just market intelligence, right?
Right.
There's some really cool tidbits inside there, and so in other words, it showcases, yeah, AI is actually very, very, very usable, and it's not just all hype, but you got to know how to frame it. Have to know how to govern it. You have to decide that there's a business use case first, not
Right.
just like, I'm going to have fun. Don't get me wrong. Always good to do that. But that's not how you build a product.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
And I guess if I were to understand it, then really the idea here would be that Databricks has spent so many years kind of building out the boring stuff because y'all were forced to, right? The foundational kind of governance layer, the infrastructure around it that can actually now give the AIs a good environment to work in the enterprise. And that's really the big play here.
Yeah. So, for example, when we started with Unity Catalog, it wasn't even purposely built for AI originally, right? It was just purposely built. We recognized that we're having a hard time with data discovery. Like we don't even know what data we have, right? Then it turned into, wait, we have no central place for administration. Okay, well, let's go fix that then. And then, like, sure, everybody has not everybody, but there's like Okta, there's Azure, Entrada. Sorry, I'm using the old Microsoft name. It's actually Entrada now, right? Like, and systems like that, like Google IAM and everything else. Right, that's great, but I'm going. How do you apply that security context to the data assets you have? Right. And then that slowly turned into, okay, well, the data assets were just originally structured tables, right? But then I realized, oh, wait, it could be the data that you're using for your models. Oh, wait, that could be the data that's semi-structured, unstructured,
Right.
and so forth and so forth and so forth. And all the functions that you're using, right? So you want to apply that same security context all throughout. And so that's how Unity Catalog came about. And again, obviously, I'm a tad bit biased, so my attitude toward the whole thing is like, even if you're not a Databricks fan, I hope you are, but still, even if you're not, right? The point is, you need these things,
Yeah.
right? In order for you to go ahead and make sure that whatever AI you're using, you can understand what data was used, how it was used, what's the time frame used, how was it trained, how is it governed? So that way you can ensure that what you're offering to your users has the right security context, has the right privacy context.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. I'm just surprised to hear that Unity didn't come out of like a deep visceral hatred for Hive Metastore, so this is new to me.
I mean, you're not entirely wrong about that, okay? Like we all definitely had our issues with Hive Metastore, but but the other key things like as much as you joke and I agree and laugh with you, Hive itself was there because it was about providing the schema infrastructure for the tables that slowly grew into this idea of a security context. Like that's why you have Ranger and all these other things, right? And itself, it wasn't initially a bad idea by any stretch of the imagination, but at the time that it started, like there were problems with a single database holding everything. By the time when we started introducing Unity Catalog, the data either it was a combination of we could break apart and distribute the problems to the file system like into S3 or some cloud object store when needed, but also we can make the databases faster and cheaper. Right, both. So the combination of that and also be able to scale out by using the underlying cloud object storage at the same time, that allowed us a lot more leeway than like when Hive Metastore was originally created. And so, yeah, you're not wrong. We all had problems with it, to put it lightly. Fundamentally, there was this idea that we were seeing early on, like the scaling problems of just trying to scale a Metastore, like
Uh-huh.
period. It wasn't even about Hive specific, just any Metastore, single Metastore was going to fail. And so the idea that we could scale using both a combination of a faster database and cloud object storage, that actually was the real winner.
Yeah,
So
no, that's really interesting. And I guess like implicitly is there this kind of strong opinion that, hey, like in order for AI to work, really the key thing to solve here is access control, like permissioning and kind of governance, because, now you're not just providing access control on top of the structured data tables, which in the past, that's kind of what I guess Hive would do for you. Now you might even go down to the assets, right? The blobs,
yes.
and like even down to code, right? You're like
Mhm.
actually permissioning can, to AI have access to pieces of code to run, or even like tools, I guess, in the agent world. Is that really the idea of like how do you control access?
100%. Because if you think about agentic systems, and I figure we're going to eventually get into multimodal, so I just figured I'll just drop the drop the call out right now. Right, is that if I was just to do even a super simplified agent right now, like dumb as all heck, right? I combine, let's just say, a bunch of inventory, that's structured data, sales, structured data, and invoices and receipts, semi-structured, unstructured data, bunch of PDFs. or images. Whether it's structured or semi-structured is irrelevant to the conversation. I either have access to the right tables or access to the right receipts, right images, or I don't, right? If I train an LM or use it as a source for the LM to go read, me as the user that's asking the question of the LM, either I'm supposed to have rights to look at these invoices or I don't have rights to look at the invoices. Okay, just break it down a little bit. I'm a semi-global company. I'm in Canada and the US. Canadians are allowed looking at Canadian stuff. US can allow US stuff. US can't look at Canada. Canada can look at US. So you could just do it dirt simple. Like I've got one bucket that says US, one bucket that says Canada for all the PDFs inside there. I can even have a simple table naming, which is like, okay, I've got a US table in Canada. We usually don't, but whatever. Let's just, for the sake of the argument, just say we have that. Okay, cool. I need something that says you're coming in from Vancouver. You can only look at the Canada tables. You can only look at the Canada receipts. Okay. So something has to tell me that. Some context somewhere has to provide that framing so that way we ensure the authentication and authorization that is allowed to access this information before the LM's even going ahead and requesting, reviewing, looking at that information.
Right.
Right.
No, 100%. That makes so much sense. And actually, like, we've been thinking a lot about this problem too. And one thing we kind of boiled it down to was that traditional ACLs and like traditional, resource-based controls just don't seem enough anymore for
That's
two
right.
reasons, really, right? One is that like the traditional approve deny is not really sufficient anymore because hey, like you might want to give it access to a receipt, but maybe you just want to not show it the dollar amount, right? But you still want to
Right.
show like everything else, right?
Right. You want to let them know the vendors,
Exactly.
because that way you can actually save money on like all the vendors that you're going to, but you don't want to know the amounts because the amount themselves is actually locked into some fiduciary within a particular country. Yeah,
Exactly. Exactly.
100%. Yeah.
And then it gets even worse. Like the less structured you go, the worse it gets. Like what if I have a
Right.
Slack message and the Slack message says, hey, like we work with this company and they have this specific bug or problem. And what if I want to give the system access to the bug or problem, but not the company,
Right.
right? My
Yeah.
goodness, like the more
Yeah.
unstructured, the more multimodal image is even worse. Like what do you even do for
Yes.
an image, right?
Right. So that's what I'm saying. Exactly. So in other words, the receipt invoice problem is the easiest one of them all. Right? Reality is much, much, much messier. Right. And unless we have the ability to actually tag and appropriately provide that security context into actual like items down to a receipt, right? We actually can't provide the security context that's required. So yeah, that's why fundamentally we're saying like we're not even pretending we've got the best solution in place. I mean, yeah, we do, but still, like what I'm saying is like, can we do better? Of course we can. Like, that's why we work with our customers. That's why we work with the community to try to figure out, are there better ways to do things? Because that's precisely the problem. Exactly the issue that you're calling out. As we go down that semi-structured route or the unstructured route, it becomes almost recursive. Like where you just like, you're recursing through the receipt going, oh, wait, I'm allowed this, but I'm not allowed this. I'm allowed this, I'm not allowed this. Like, in other words, I'm allowed the metadata that says, okay, you have these fields. I'm not allowed knowing what the field values are. Lovely, right?
Yeah, it gets super complicated. And I'm curious to hear, you probably have a super good view of the enterprise, right? And, Databricks in general, I think it's just like the enterprise easy button now. I need data platform, Databricks, right? I need AI platform, Databricks. What are they struggling with when it comes to AI and data today? Is it really this permissioning aspect? Is it models? Like, are they trying to train models and get them to be more intelligent? Like,
Okay,
what's the general story there?
there's actually an okay, so I'm gonna give you two pieces, like two framing pieces of collateral that I think will be useful for everybody. One is that State of AI Agents report that I was talking about. The other is a blog by Jeannie Chu and Connor Murphy called Technical Debt of Gen AI Systems. Okay, these are the two references. To answer your question, when it comes to enterprises, what they more often do is that they initially start with FOMO. I gotta do it. I gotta do it. And so that's why I keep saying simple things like, what's the business problem you're trying to solve first? Like the one that doesn't require me to talk about AI at all, right? Because more times than not, you can say, look, Dude, that's a standard machine learning problem. I don't need AI to solve this at all. I can make this like fundamentally cheaper for you, right? And so, for example, in the early days, so you still remember my friend Brooke Winnick, right? Yeah, yeah. And so she leads. We truly don't believe in this idea that you're supposed to pre-train everything. There are some scenarios where it makes sense. Don't get me wrong, but why don't you just leverage existing models? And it's no longer the term du jour because agents is the term du jour, but you still remember RAG, right? So, so literally, my response is like, just ragify it. Like, I don't care how you ragify it. I don't care if it's a vector search table. I don't care. At this point, it can be slow as anything, and you're just reading a bunch of stuff from S3. I don't care. But the point is, just ragify it. Like, for the love of dear God, why would you pre-train? And to your point, zero shot espresso. Exactly. Zero shot the fracker, right? Like, why would you do that? Like, eh, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't fine tune. There are some scenarios where fine tuning absolutely 100% makes sense. But the point I'm just trying to get is like, start with the easy button. And so the reason I brought that up is because a lot of these companies, they were sold a bunch of, hoo-ha, trying to make it family friendly. And they came back to us afterwards. They're going, you're right. And so then they're like, okay, so how much do we want to spend? And so remember, these companies were prepared to spend millions of dollars. And then they came back to us and we're going like, yeah, we want you to spend a couple hundred. You're like, wait, what? Are you going to make money? No. Like, no. But it's like, why? Because I want you to run 50 experiments,
Uh,
$100 each, if even that much, because I want you to try things. And then based on the smaller experiments, you can figure out which one of these works. Frankly, I don't think you even need 50. By the 20th one, you probably already figure out 2 pretty good scenarios to figure out and just start from there. In all
right, right.
seriousness.
And is this, I guess, like the innovation lab scenario where like they have
Right.
innovation
100%.
lab? Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And so that's how we started. And so, for example, one thing let me just I love doing this. This is you can still tell I'm sometimes a sales guy, right? So right. So if I go ahead and let's see, where is it?
You need like a red hat and a blue hat. Put the red hat
Oh yeah,
on the
exactly,
sales and
exactly.
then blue
Okay.
hat when you're
So
like geeking out.
so if I look at the Fox Sports app, okay, there you go, right there, right? All right. If I go ahead and click on the search bar, okay, and look at the bottom, it says right there, built on Databricks.
Uh,
Okay. So I'm saying that's real. Okay. We help companies go into production with AI. All right. And so what ends up happening more times than not is that once they do those little experiments, the ones I was telling you, the innovation lab style, they realize this is something valuable. And more times than not, it starts with just like, I'm automating a dumb task, like a task that we all know, right? Like, I want to go ahead and make sure the PR runs these checks. Okay. We all do a version of GitHub Actions. Perfect. Okay. If you have something a little bit more complicated, you can get the LM to go ahead and look at your policy, your set of rules, and so now run these checks too. Right? Now I don't have to waste an engineer's time to go do that. Something as simple as that. To tagging legal contracts. So that way we're like, okay, any law firm, they actually have contracts that have to go to different firms. Why not go ahead and have an LM or an agent, excuse me, go ahead and actually know, oh, wait, this might be a company that we normally do international shipping, but right now, for some reason, they're doing a healthcare one. We need to send this contract actually to healthcare, not to international shipping. Well, yeah, you can get an agent to basically review the contract to figure out, oh, yeah, the likelihood of where this is supposed to go is supposed to be in healthcare. Go send it there instead, right? So that's how you start in terms of like basically getting as a per innovation lab, getting people familiar and how to do these things. And so once they start getting familiar, that's when they can start doing the real innovations, right? Like in other words, instead of just being boring automation, they can start doing really building real skill sets or real new activities or new ideas that they didn't have before. But you can only do that when the people who are building these things are actually comfortable with the tooling. Right. It's like any other system. Like, for example, when we introduced databases back in like business databases, like back in the 70s. Okay. Right. People were like, what's a database? Right. I'm perfectly fine putting everything in a file folder. Right. right? And then over time, they started getting more and more comfortable with these things, right? We now are seeing a surge of databases all over again because we're like, oh, we could use something with super low latency for the purposes of an agent to keep track of everything. Yeah, yeah. And so why do you think we partnered up and acquired Neon, right? Because lake-based, that's the whole point. Database systems are actually crucial. Like inside the State of AI agent report that I was just referring to, we actually would go ahead and showcase how basically something like it jumped up to like 90% of all databases that were being generated were generated by AI. They weren't generated by humans anymore.
Yeah.
Massively jump. And then back to the Jeannie and Connor's the hidden technical debt of Gen AI systems. One of the most crucial callouts is that stakeholder thing. As in the people who you're working with, do they understand what Gen AI is actually useful for? That's why you do these little innovation labs to get people on the same page first. So that way, the developer, the tester, the engineer, the marketing person, the PM, all these people be on the same page. They can grow together, right? An innovation lab only works when everybody grows together, not just like, oh, I, one geek, am going to go off on my own. That's very useful at times. Don't get me wrong. I'm always encouraging that. You can sort of tell that from my own personality, anyways. But by the same token, like, it only is effective, though, if you get the rest of the team to jump on board as well.
Yeah,
Right.
100%. That makes
Yeah.
so much sense. And also, I'm curious to dig in a little bit because I have this thesis that actually most things don't need an agent. Like you actually can get pretty far, especially for the enterprise use cases, with just LLMs and like deterministic workflows, right? Of like calling LLMs and, so some of the things we called out, like say a GitHub action or a classifier. Those are all, yes, you can put an LLM in the loop to make it more powerful, but at the end of the day, you don't really need a truly non-deterministic dynamic kind of workflow. You actually can kind of enumerate the steps to make this happen, right? Curious
100.
to hear on your end, like what does that look like? Like, are agents kind of, I think they are pretty obviously overused as a term in AI today. And are we maybe still seeing so much low-hanging fruit in just non-agentic stuff that like maybe that's one big area in which the enterprise is supposed to just adopt first?
No, you're absolutely right. So we all use the term agents, and the reason I follow the definition of agents a la compound AI systems that was developed by the Bear Lab, right? Um, the whole premise is that i- whether it's a machine learning, whether it's an LLM as the center, you actually have to put a whole bunch of things around it to make it useful. That's it. At minimum, authentication authorization. But even if I pretend I don't care about that, right? I need to get current weather information. I need to go extract out a bunch of receipts, images, right? It's only useful when I can get it, whatever that it is, to go ahead and extract additional data sometime. Okay. So to your point exactly, why is Databricks fundamental on data first? Because your agent, whatever that agent is only as good as the data you give it. All right. Let's start with that. Second, does everything have to be AI? No. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, I unequivocally agree with you. There's so many times where people have come to me and it's like, "Oh, I need an agent for this, I need an agent for that." I'm like, "Okay, that's I don't mind the word agent by itself. It's like big data. It's an overused term, so I'm not against the word agent itself, okay? But I'm like, but what's I mean? I have to have an LM. I'm like, okay, why? Like,
Like, no, that's
literally,
an if
why?
statement right there. That's an if statement, not an
Right,
LLM.
right. It's like, why? Exactly. I'm like, why? Like, tell me why. I mean, it's fun. Okay, not in production, but sure, why not? Right. But why? Right. And more times than not, that's exactly it. Like people forget about machine learning in the process. People forget about standard data science. Hell, at this point, forget about rules. Like you could just have like a case statement that's five like statements long, and then that probably would solve your problem. I don't. That's so much cheaper than data science. So much even cheaper than an LM. Right. So to your point exactly, like I don't mind the word agent so much just because it implies everything, but most of the time, just to your point, everybody's always implying agent has to be an LM in the middle. I'm going like, don't get me wrong, that's super useful, super helpful, and when it's appropriate, my goodness, yes, by all means, go do it. But it doesn't require that.
Yeah, makes so much sense. And then maybe last question before we wrap up. I think like maybe in the last 2 years or so, there's been like a big GPU craze, right? I'm sure
Yeah.
Databricks has been at the center of it. It's like, hey, like Spark, you guys traditionally run like large amounts of CPU. Like, what about the GPUs? Can we run the models? I'm curious to hear if that's changed. I'm sensing a little bit of shift in the industry, and almost like I like to tell my team that, hey, people don't seem to want GPUs, they just want LLMs, right? Like one level of abstraction up. Like, I mean, there's not that many people who actually know how to use GPUs effectively, right?
God, yeah, yeah. Okay, so there's two thoughts processes around this. Okay, the first one is very close to exactly how you described it, which is like if you keep the model small enough, you can do inference on CPUs relatively quickly, anyways. And so the only real problem is training. And then the things that you're not the trainer, like you're just at most fine tuning it. And again, you're building an agent. And so extracting an image and whatever else and tossing it to a model isn't actually that killer, right? Especially if it's small, right? I can definitely grok if it's like super image centric, like where super large images have to do lots of windowing. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Like that's fine. I believe that. And so like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff we can do with CPUs, and there's a lot of startups that are actually trying to figure out actually how to make these models more efficient. Some of them are good, some of them not so much. Just because they often forget about the minor technicalities, like did it fit in memory? Nope. Okay, then that's your problem number one. Don't talk to me until you solve that problem. Okay. Yeah, because I have one company who's telling me, "Oh, we'll fit this in. We're only using these 2 gigabyte 2 gigabytes of memory." I'm like, okay, which model are you using? And then they're like telling me whatever model, and I'm like, that model can't fit in 2 gigs, right? Like, you do know that, right? Like, it's in the name.
Right.
Like, I don't have to there's no prediction here. It's literally in the name, you can't do that, okay? And so they literally forgot that. I'm like, "Okay, well, good luck with your startup." So, alright. So in other words, can we just use CPUs or look, the AWS form, which is they got the Gravitron and Tratium. Yeah, yeah, I could definitely see that. But there's also another mode of thinking, which is actually, sorry, there's three, right? Which is basically, do we go ahead and like have, for example, Spark Rapids, like for the NVIDIA folks, we're saying like, let's go ahead and get ETL processing done in GPUs. And what a lot of people don't know is that we've been trying to solve that problem in the database world for a very, very, very,
Yeah.
very, very, very long time. Okay. And a lot of people think, oh, this is new. I'm like, no, this is very old. Okay. We've been trying to figure out how to actually get database operations to run properly in GPUs ever since we understood the concept of GPU, ever since the concept of creating databases. And if I was to go back to even my SQL Server days, right? Like even then we were trying, okay? And like basically we're like, this isn't gonna work. Doesn't mean it can't work now. No, we make some breakthroughs that I don't know about, right? Like so I'm not saying no to that idea, but I'm also saying like what the Rapids team and hats off to NVIDIA for this one. Okay, like the Rapids team has actually created something pretty cool. There are a bunch of things that, like, when it comes to BI type queries, ETL, but it's very BI centric, and just as long as the Cartesian isn't that big, it's actually not bad. Like seriously, like it actually is screaming fast. And often the sales cycle version is, oh yeah, take your old GPUs, you can use them for inference, and then you can do some quick BI and that. I'm like, yeah, there's some validity to that. I don't think anybody's figured out how to scale that properly, but I definitely see some validity to that, and it's worth exploring. And there's a bunch of us that are doing it, like in the industry, as a general statement, anyway. So it's like, yeah, and so I definitely see that. And then there's, of course, the NVIDIA push, which is basically the super chips, right? The Grace Blackwells, the Vera Rubins. Sorry, that's the latest one. The Vera Rubins, right? Oh, sorry. As of the recording of this one, the Vera Rubin is the latest one, right? Vera being the CPU, Rubin being the GPU, where you have enough of fabric wide enough to basically your mem copy from the CPU to the GPU basically is like yippee ki You don't really
It's
care.
the biggest
Yeah,
bottleneck in the
right.
past.
Exactly. And unequivocally is the biggest bottleneck. And so that solves a lot of problems. And with the super chips, I could definitely see like if we can get the cost down, this being a plausible solution. The usual problem with that one, of course, is getting the cost down. Right. The super chips are worth their money for a reason. And so like I could see that over time maybe that happening, especially like when AMD trying to do its thing. Intel still feels weird to talk about Intel, but Intel doing its thing, right? With the backing of TSMC. That's a whole other story. But the point I'm just trying to get is like, it's coming back in terms of saying, can we apply GPUs to ETL and BI workloads? I think we're still not there yet, but I think there's some solid trajectory to that point. So I wouldn't throw it away. I'm skeptical, but like I'm not saying no. I'm just like going like, I'm not buying into the hype yet, but I did, in fact, like last GTC in San Jose, I was talking about actually like literally Spark Rapids and how they actually broke down what went into the GPU and what stayed in the CPU, for example, right? And so in other words, like I'm coming in from like understanding the internals of how these systems work, and I definitely see where the pattern can exist, right? But to your point, would you start off in the first place? Can we still maximize the CPU itself? Oh, heck yeah. We can still do a lot more there. Like, my usual solution, my usual answer for everybody is like, oh, we can. It's like, look, I can still 5 years later use my M1 Mac to my heart's content. Don't get me wrong, I have an M4 too, as well, okay? And an M2 for that matter. But right? But like my M1's fine. It is my M1's taken a beating in half. I replaced the monitor, but it works beautifully. And I still drag that little 13-inch M1 and MacBook Air with me all the time just because it is faster than anything else. Because what? We have not efficiently used the CPU at all.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of other bottlenecks, right? Like network, for
Exactly.
example, just like
Exactly.
physically, you can't solve
Yeah.
that. You know?
Yeah. We can't. So there's a whole other set of bottlenecks that have nothing to do with the CPU in this case.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
solve that first.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, we're at the end of the episode. Thanks for
Sweet.
joining us, Denny. This was super high signal, super insightful. I think it was like very useful to almost like peer behind the curtains and like see what's going on in the enterprise world of AI and data. So yeah, really appreciate you taking the time. And then yeah, maybe we'll do another follow up at the end of 2026 and get your thoughts then too.
Heck yeah, I'm sure it'll be completely different. So yes, that's fair.
Yes, all predictions just wildly wrong, you know?
Yeah. Just I was wrong about everything. Sorry.
All right, catch you next time, Denny.
You got it. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Zero Shot Espresso. If you liked the episode, share it with another engineer who spends way too much time thinking about data systems in the age of AI. See you next time.